Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Village of Walton Hills Planning Commission meeting of April 1st, 2021. This meeting is being live streamed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are following House Bill 404 that allows public bodies to meet electronically through July 2021. Okay. That was the first order. Second item, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll do the roll call. Joe D'Amico.
Here.
Janice St. John.
Here.
Raymond Whedon.
Present.
Okay, myself, a member, Don Colagraph. Also present is our law solicitor, John Montello, our street commissioner, zoning inspector, Rob Kalman. We also have George Smerigan here today, our consultant from Tactical Planning LLC, to discuss these proposed amendments with us. Okay, that's item 3. Item 4, can I get a motion for approval of the minutes from December 9th, 2020?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of Planning Commission December 9, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Raymond Whedon. Vote on the motion. Mr. D'Amico.
Yes.
Janice St. John.
Yes.
Raymond Whedon.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Oh, next item, I did forget about. Can we get a motion to excuse Mr. Todd Toaz? He had to go out, he went out of town for the holiday. He might be viewing, he wasn't sure. He did look at the packet, and you know, he will discuss it with us.
So moved.
Okay, I'll make that motion to excuse Todd Toaz. Second by Raymond Whedon. Vote on the motion. Mr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Janice St. John?
Yes.
Raymond Whedon?
Yes.
Myself, Don Colagraph, yes. Mr. Toaz excused. He didn't go anywhere warm, so we can't. I think he went north of us. I think he was going to Chicago or something to see his daughter. So, yeah. So we're not as, it's nice that he's off, but not too jealous as if he was going south for the weekend. Okay. Anybody, is Todd on there or anything? Okay. Also, if we have Kevin who is videotaping it, if any residents or anybody out there watching has a question, and they'll type it in, and then Kevin will let us know, and then we can respond to that. Okay. I have no old business in front of us. We have nothing that's in front of us right now from the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission, correct, Mr. Kalman?
Nothing new. No.
Yeah, we have nothing at this time. What we have here for item 6 are code amendments that we feel we'd like to update our existing codes, our codified ordinances, and these are some of the proposed code amendments. And I thought we would start with item A, which is 021-01, 1292.11, construction standards, and 1292.12, maintenance and storage standards. In your packet, we do have what's existing, and then highlighted in yellow and red what the changes would be. Anybody, George, did you want to?
I think these are important improvements to your paving requirements and your parking lot maintenance requirements. I think you're lacking a little bit right now, and this will bring you up, I think, to where you need to be.
And George, can I have you just kind of give your background and what you do and you as our consultant, just for if people are watching and where you fit in?
Sure. I have a master's in city and regional planning. I've been working in the field of municipal planning for, goodness, we're looking at 50 years now. That's why this is all white, right? And I provide consulting services to a number of communities. I am by contract the city planner for the city of Beechwood. I'm the city planner for the city of Pepper Pike. I am the city planner for the city of Warrensville Heights. I'm also by contract the city planner for the city of Strongsville and for the city of Olmsted Falls. So I'm dealing with these issues on a regular basis across the region. And so hopefully what I can bring to you is that knowledge and that experience in dealing with all these issues that are coming up in every community and allow you to be effective in how you deal with them.
Very good, thank you, George. 1292.11 and 1292.12, Rob Kalman and Joe Gelati took a look at it, made these changes, and then George, Rob, and Joe suggested that we move it to George from there, because the three of us talked, and then we moved it to George. He took a look at it, put his eyes on it, and made a few adjustments too. So this is the final thing. We did have this in council, as Ray remembers, and what we did talk about kind of came out of it was more about the repairs, and that's where we have that one item, right?
Right now, you allow too many options, and you don't require certain things, and I think you need to do that so that we have a high standard. I think that's important for the village. And then the same thing with the maintenance issues. You know, you want to be able to maintain these parking lots in a manner that speaks well for the village. And so we need to have that language in the code in order to do that. So what this is doing is giving you the tools you need to make those things happen effectively.
I had one question, well, one point I wanted to make, and that is, I agree with Mr. Smerigan, that this does give us most of the tools that we need. However, it may be limiting the village a little bit. That line that's stricken that says, except when an alternate surface treatment is authorized by the Planning Commission. I think if we keep that line in there, that still allows the village to approve new emerging technologies, asphalt mixed with polymers and all these other kinds of things that are there. I mean, there's other technologies besides the four that we have spelled out, the hot applied. I completely agree with the hot applied, the concrete, the brick, permeable pavers. But do we want to limit it to the point where if these newer technology that is there and available, and I think when we, and maybe Rob may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but even with the Horseshoe project last year, it wasn't, rocket science new, but they pulled and relayed kind of. So I don't think we want to limit ourselves to the point of every time there's a new technology that somebody wants to propose, say a vendor wants to propose to do a road, we have to come back, or something else, a park lot, we have to come back and amend this. So I think keeping that piece in there about having the Planning Commission to give us some flexibility gives us a little more openness to, to an alternative method and approve of, because it's pretty restrictive. Cold, installed asphalt, cold patch, chip seal, and gravel, it's very clear what's prohibited, so we don't have to worry about that. But I just think, if we keep that other line in there, it gives us an option for newer technology without having to come back and redo the whole thing again.
Right. Any comments on that, or? George, do you have anything, I mean, with that?
I'm just thinking about whether or not you really want the planning commission responsible for determining whether or not something's a comparable paving technique. I would think that, you know, the city engineer would probably be who you want to make that determination. You know, because I think it puts you in a very difficult position. I mean, unless you have that background, you're trying to take a position on something that's not your area of expertise.
Yeah,
And I think if you're going to do that, it ought to come from the engineer.
If they had something that was comparable that isn't listed here, they could apply for a variance and get a variance through the zoning board, right?
Yeah, that would be the,
That would be what they'd have to do, yes.
You know, and it takes it off us and puts it on them and on the engineers, actually.
Yeah, to prove that it's actually comparable.
Right.
Well, as long as there's some process for,
Right, I get what
you
you
know.
were saying, which makes sense.
you know, I mean, there's, you know, things are developed all the time,
Right.
new and improved, you know, methods of doing this kind of stuff. So,
No, I understand where you're coming from. I don't disagree. I just think you want to be careful about putting yourself in a position where you're trying to make technical determinations that really aren't necessarily your bailiwick, and that would put you in an awkward position. So I think we'd have to do it in some way that where the engineer made a determination that it was comparable and made that representation to you.
that would be fine too, you know, something to give us, keep that door open for newer technology.
But with that scratched, it does leave the door, they still have the door open, they just have to go for a variance. So the zoning would
There's a
have
process.
to approve it along with the engineer.
Yeah, there's a process.
Okay. All right.
Is there, how do you feel about that, Ryan?
That's fine. I mean, as long as there's a way, there's a
Right,
method.
right, I understand, because
Right.
you hate to just close the door and say, hey, these are the only items,
Right.
and here now, 3 years later, there's a product that might even be better than those 4 items we have listed or whatever, now we don't,
Right.
I'm not even listening to that, to that. Or at least this gives us that option for it to go, they could go for a variance.
And to go back to your point, if you do it as a variance, then the burden of proof is on the applicant.
So the question, so if someone wants to do a large lot, they're going to repave a large lot, and they go out and they solicit 3 bids, how do they evaluate their 3 bids if one of them is a newer technology? Does that whole bidding process come back to zoning, or can the engineer check off on that? So is it?
Well, they have,
You know what I mean?
they'd want to come before zoning first, correct? And see if we would, if they could get the variance to allow it.
Well, see, the way
It's a
this is
bid.
written,
You
it
put
has
them
to
on
be
a bid.
approved by the municipal engineer.
Right.
And so if they submit to him information that indicates to him in satisfactory fashion, from a technical standpoint, that it's comparable, then he's in a position to approve it. But I don't think you want to be pushing the door open too wide. If he can make a determination that you're getting the same quality out of it, then I think we're fine. And that's what this says.
Is that
Go ahead, go ahead.
What does permeable pavers mean? Is that comparable pavers, or what is permeable?
Permeable pavers are pavers where the water can pass through it.
Oh, gotcha.
So instead of having the total water runoff, you get some water that actually passes through the pavement and gets absorbed in the ground. It reduces storm runoff.
Yes.
Those are becoming very popular in parking lots now.
And that might encompass the new technology that might go right.
Exactly. So we are using some new
Yeah, that's
technology
one.
by
That's
saying
one.
this.
I mean, they even have permeable asphalt now,
Yeah.
certain asphalt.
Yeah, there's permeable pavers, there's permeable asphalt, there's actually permeable concrete. That's all out there in the marketplace, and it's all usable and approved. And it's just a matter of putting it in the right application.
Right.
I can tell you, for instance, when they redid the parking lot at Pepper Pike City Hall, they have one whole row of parking that's all permeable pavement. And they did that so that they could get the water to run off that way as opposed to getting it ponding. So people are doing this as a regular course of action nowadays.
Right. So, I mean, so even if it says except, prior to issuance of a permit, or when approved, or when an alternate service is approved by the municipal engineer, or something like that, just to keep that. I just think this really points to four technologies. So, hot asphalt, concrete, permeable, and whatever the other one is, brick. And it's not open enough to, and I understand what we don't want to happen, I get that.
Right.
But that's spelled out very specifically, what you cannot do.
The only thing I, like, just what stands out with me is, by them going for a variance, then they have to prove to the zoning board that it is a better method. Where otherwise, we know these are a proven method, and if they go to something else, then it does fall on the engineer, then the engineer has to see whether or not that product is comparable to those other ones.
Right.
Where if it goes for a variance, it's like what you said, they have to prove to the zoning board instead of us. I mean, I guess it's the same, but it puts the burden on them, where if we have it in there, then it's on us. And then we have to justify the decision on why it isn't, where otherwise they have to justify it to us why it's just as good a product. I don't know.
Well, again,
I guess my thing is I want to have as much control over it as
Okay.
we can. Are we going to have more control? I guess to me the answer would be, would we have more control if going for a variance versus an engineer making an opinion? That's what, because to me it all, we get in that gray area, and I want it to be so black and white that we don't have, and because of some of the things that have gone on in other municipalities and stuff. So, I don't know, I guess that would be the question to me. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Now, I have a question, Mr. Smarigan. You represent quite a few communities.
Yes.
In your opinion, you've seen a lot of this, these regulations. Are there any other paving methods that are not included currently in this?
No, the language that we
Regulation?
have here would include everything that's being used today.
Okay, so I don't think I think it may be a little premature to open it to other methods where they're not proven, they're not even used yet. And when that time comes, if maybe something different comes on the market, then at that time, that can be addressed. But I very much agree that Planning Commission isn't really the place to get a paving method approved or not approved.
With that said, and Ray, is this maybe what we're looking for is, I guess to me, I mean, do we need to have, like, so let's say if I came in, I was gonna pave my parking lot, and I go to the computer, or I come in here and I speak with the building commissioner, I get the standards, and I see these items here, and they're not the method I was gonna use. I guess I would say, well, how do I get my method approved? And then we would tell them that you have to go for a variance.
Okay.
With that said, should we just leave it that way, or do we want to see it in writing here, or just have it follow that's the normal course you would take if it's, I don't know.
Well, I think that anything that isn't spelled out in the code, or is spelled out in the code, and they want to do something differently, the automatic course is to go for a variance.
Right.
So if this is spelled out and that line is left out, and they come up with something new and exciting to do, then, the natural course would be to go to the zoning board for a variance. You know, and like George says, you know, then the burden of proof would be on them to prove that it's an acceptable product. And I'm sure that if a new and exciting product came out to pave your parking lot with, the engineers are gonna know about it long before we are.
Yes,
You know, it's,
sure.
you know, it's gonna be.
Without question.
That's where she, right,
Yeah,
right.
you know, so they're gonna know right off the bat whether it's something that's gonna be acceptable or not. You know, and it's my understanding that what we're trying to do is tighten things up so that it is black and white, so there is no question of what you're allowed to do and not do.
I guess I would just speak from the enforcement standpoint. When there's more boxes in the permitting process for a developer to check off, it makes them think about what they're doing. And what I've had to deal with regards to this code in the last 3-4 years, I'd rather have it like this personally. Whenever we have or as approved, there's other items in our codes that say or as approved by planning. I know, you know, there's not supposed to be any prejudgment or anything else, but you get a developer, and not necessarily in front of this board as it's constructed right now, but you get a developer in front of a board saying, oh my goodness, I paid for the property, and you want me to put brick on my building? Well, yeah, it's been in the code. It was there before you bought the property. And then this board is left struggling with, well, you know, it's a new person. That element of compassion is there. And the only thing that I've seen in my 8 years of being here is every time we exert compassion, we end up on the wrong side of it. So I'd rather have it black and white. And you know what? If you come up with a polymer-based pavement product that can sustain all anticipated loads, go to zoning.
And just one more thing, you know, the standard for an appeal is much higher for a variance than it is with the planning commission hearing. So they would have to demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence. It can't just be monetary reasons, it's got to be. So they'd have to have a higher standard of proof from a legal standpoint.
Right, practical difficulty, you need to show a hardship, on this one, I rather leave it like this. It'll make the enforcement side of things
All right.
much easier.
But it's a good point, because it's good to know that there is the point is well taken, there is another avenue.
Oh,
So the door, we're not saying this is it and the door is closed. You do have another avenue if a better product comes out.
and there is a legal avenue, and I embrace the fact that we have a legal avenue, because, you know, I get in situations where it's not black and white, and I'm happy to tell somebody to go to the BZA. And they're the tool in the toolbox that should be used when, you know, this is a gray area, or you know what, I have a practical hardship, or I have, you know, due to the topography. They're there for that type of thing, and they should be utilized as such. But on the other side, as far as on the front end, I like the way this is, personally, on this code.
How does everybody feel?
Well, the only question I would have at this point, this is concerning like new construction. This isn't talking about maintaining or if somebody's not maintaining their surfaces, their parking lot, this isn't the code that would apply to that.
Next page.
Next page.
Okay,
How's
that's fine.
Great, feel. George, how do you, I know you're involved putting your eyes on it always, you know, you put your eyes on it quite a few times already.
Yeah.
Feel pretty good about it too?
I think that this is the way you ought to move it forward for now.
Okay.
And I think this will put you in much better shape moving forward.
Rob, you feel good about it?
Yes.
Joe? John?
Yeah.
I feel good about it. Ray, you feel, Janice?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, with that said, do we want to go through the other items? This was really the one we had concern of. Rob, any concern with anything else under 1292.11? I know we just with that, that seemed, I know we went through, George looked at everything else we're pretty good with, why we have the page in front of us.
No, I don't have anything else. I don't know if you expressed, Mayor, but this is very important. This is something I feel this board should move on to council. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask, John, should I ask for a motion for approval to move to council for adoption as we go through each one? Would that be appropriate?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the proposed code amendment in 1292.11 construction standards, item A, to move to council for adoption? Or I can make that, or if somebody wants to
Mayor,
make that.
I would entertain the motion of moving 1292.11 construction standards to council for approval as it's written here.
With the changes in item A?
Yeah, with the changes that they made here.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Raymond Whedon. We'll vote on the motion. Mr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Janice St. John?
Yes, Mayor, did we include 1292.12 as well?
No, we haven't gotten to that one yet. I'm going to
Okay.
do them separately.
All right, then yes, on that motion.
Okay. Mr. Whedon?
Yes.
Okay, and myself, Don Colograph, yes. So that's 4 yeses. We'll move that to council. Okay. Anybody on, Kevin, or? Okay. No questions at this time, then? All right, second page, right behind 1292.11 is we have 1292.12, maintenance and storage standards. This one was also reviewed by Mr. Kalman, Joe Gelati, myself, and Mr. Smerigan. And in red, you'll see the changes, the items that actually were added at this time. George, did you want to make any comments? Or?
I would just say that, we've added this requirement that the signage and the pavement markings have to meet the building code and be approved by the municipal engineer. They've made some adjustments in the building code about safe paths, et cetera, and so we want to make sure that everything that's out there is in compliance. And the other part of this is that we are providing here the engineer with the ability to indicate where he finds that the parking lot is in such repair that they need to resurface the entire parking lot and not just patch it, that he can direct that to be done. I think that's critical moving forward to maintain your properties.
Rand, I think, correct me if one of the questions that came out of council, because we did discuss this a little bit with council, was what type of asphalt spot repairs, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was one of the concerns of council is it wasn't the type of asphalt and whether or not and how large an area when we're talking about this type of repair, and whether road repair would fall into this, or would this impact the ability for road repairs to be done?
These are parking areas. In 1292.12, we're talking parking areas.
Okay.
Okay.
And what we did is we have the reference in here back up to that paving section, because we don't want to do cold patch into parking lots. We want it to be hot applied asphalt.
Okay.
And again, like I say, if the parking lot's in really poor condition, where the engineer can order a complete resurfacing. But this is what you need to have in your regulation so that you can ensure that the parking areas are maintained in a way that don't become problematic long-term for the village.
So in essence, this is saying that any maintenance of parking areas.
Correct,
Refer back to 129211.
correct.
For the.
For
what's
pavement
acceptable.
materials, yes.
But it looks like that, what you got in red on this one just gives all the power to the village engineer. Says if you got enough bad spots in it, you gotta redo the whole parking lot, and that's up to him to make that decision.
He has to make that determination.
No more going to Lowe's and buying 20 bags of cold patch, huh?
This is pretty consistent to what's out there too.
This is what everybody does. It really is. The standard you're putting here is what everybody has now. So you'd be being consistent with virtually all the places where I'm working.
If not, maybe even a little bit above some, quite a few, okay.
Yeah, you're doing what's the right thing to do here in terms of maintaining properties. Some communities are extremely aggressive about this.
Anybody have any questions related to that?
I just have one question for Rob or for George. So in this 129212, if someone wants to repair a lot, this is a permit required in order to do maintenance?
Yeah.
Because 129211 speaks of the permitting process. Is there a permit required to do?
Yeah, there's a paving permit required.
I mean, but are there permits? If I want to repair my lot, do I have to get a permit? Can I just?
If you hire a contractor, the contractor will come in and get licensed, and at that time, they'll let us know the extent. Typically, they'll let us know the extent of the resurfacing or paving that needs to be done. Going back to what was brought up in council, there really is, there's still discretion here, okay? And the discretion is this. If I have Cummins or NPK or anybody, Smith and Obie, you got a beautiful parking lot. You got one hole popped open. And they go out there and they patch it to get through the winter. Those companies, the good citizens, the good companies that we have, typically hot patch it on their own come springtime. So we're not making this code this strict to target people who self-govern and take care of their property. Did I make a left turn, Ray? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I apologize.
So they can do that without obtaining a permit. They don't have to get a permit.
If
to
it's
do that.
if it's a small repair, they can do a small temporary repair
Right.
without obtaining a permit. When you cut it and you're applying hot asphalt, you're going to get a permit.
Okay.
Everybody? George, I know you, Rob, feel good about it?
I do, yeah.
Well,
Joe?
I think a company that's policing their own parking lot and maintaining it properly probably would not realize they would need to get a permit to properly fix a few holes in their parking lot that developed over the winter.
And a lot of times, maybe I shouldn't be saying names.
No, you're better off not saying.
Yeah.
There are some people, Joe, I drive by and they're properly taken care of. I call Lisa, and a lot of times it's to my surprise. Call Lisa, first thing I say is, hey, so-and-so pull a permit. Oh yeah, the contractor came by. So it truly is to my surprise, because there's so many things that are, they try to do by the darkness of night. But honestly, if I'm driving around and I see somebody doing something, the first person I call is Lisa. Hey, the permit? Oh yeah, they were actually in here. And okay. And then if they aren't, and I go and talk to them, it's just like any other kind. Oh, we're just doing this. Well, you're saw cutting across the parking lot. Maybe you should, so. Those companies, the companies that maintain their stuff, they typically hire contractors. They're not trying to do it themselves. Contractors typically will call us and say, hey, what are you requiring?
Okay.
Okay. Joe, you're,
Yes, I'm
Any
fine
questions?
with it, yeah.
John? Just going to keep going around the board, Janice?
I'm fine.
Ray?
No question.
Okay. I'm good with it. I'd like to get another motion for 1292.12 maintenance storage standards for approval with the amendments made here on this sheet in red, and approval from this committee and then move it to council for adoption. If I could get a motion for that.
Mayor, I'd like to move to approve of 1292.12 maintenance and storage standards with the proposed amendments, and move to council for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rain and Whedon. Vote on the motion. Mr. D'Amico?
Yes,
Janice St. John?
Yes.
Raymond Whedon?
Yes.
Don Colograph, yes. 4 yeses. Thank you, everybody. We'll move those to council. Okay, we'll move to, that takes care of item A, 021-01. We'll move to item B, 021-02. Was there any comments or anything, Kevin, for item A? Okay. We'll move to item B, which is 021-02. It's proposed code amendments, and we'll just go in the order that's there. In your packet, we'll start with 1252-02. And I think the second page, it's put together the same way. The changes are in red, whether we're removing them or adding them. George, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, what originally started this is that the state of Ohio revised their standards and their language for what they used to call group homes, but now call residential facilities. And so one of the problems you have is that because they've changed all the terminology and they've created new criteria, your old standards don't apply properly anymore, and so you need to get updated so that you get in line with the state statute and with the federal requirements. So what's happening is this: they've gone away from the terminology of group homes, and they've got into what they call now residential facilities. And essentially what they're doing is they're providing protection for there are some protected groups who get special consideration under federal law, and that gets picked up under the state law. So folks who are like developmentally disabled and those kinds of things have a right to be in a residential neighborhood in a single-family dwelling up to a certain number of individuals. And the federal law and the state law requires that you treat those as if they were a single-family dwelling, okay? When they get beyond a certain size, then they become multifamily facilities, and those you do not have to permit in the single-family residential districts. So what we have tried to do is take the new language that was put into the state statute and mirror it into your regulations so that you're up to speed with complying with the state requirements in this regard. So in addition to that, we had a thing in here about bed and breakfast. You don't have to permit bed and breakfast. They're not protected like the residential facilities are. But at the time that we did this, right before the COVID hit,
Right, that's what,
you had a proposal from somebody for a facility, and I had suggested that if you were going to permit a facility, you don't have to, but if you were going to, then we ought to have some standards for it, so it's just not running wild out there. And so that's what was drafted, and so that's part of what's in this language. Again, that never came to fruition, I don't think, and you're not required to do that, so that really is not as critical as these residential facility language that you have in here, because we're required by law to permit those in your single-family residential district. Now, what we've done is we've picked up the definition that's set forth in the state statute, and we've simply mirrored it here. The other thing that we stuck in here was this prohibition about the renting of rooms. And we were making an exception for bed and breakfast. But again, like I say, you don't have to do bed and breakfast, so you could eliminate that exception and just have a prohibition against renting of rooms if that's your desire. So you got a couple of things here, and again, the thing with the bed and breakfast language, because my suggestion was if you're going to have one, you need standards. I gave you like a laundry list of potential standards. But if we're not moving forward with that, then, you know, we don't need to address that necessarily today. But I think you do need to move forward with the residential facility language so that your local code is in sync with the state statute. Because if you're not, that's going to potentially cause problems for you down the road.
Okay, well, George, why don't we do this? Because I think if we go through this, if we go through 1252 and just take out what pertains to bed and breakfast for this time, because right now our existing ordinances protect us, they say no bed and breakfasts.
Right.
So I think we should just leave it. I'm fine with leaving that the way it is and just getting our, you know, however the body feels here, getting us in sync with the state and federal standards when it comes to the other residential facilities. So,
Well, what I can do is I can take this language now that, you know, if that's the direction that the commission wants to go, and I'll clean this up to take that other language out and give you only the language that you need to get in compliance with the state statute.
Well, if I'm looking at this right, like on the second page of this, we got adult care facility, adult family home, adult group home, that's all being taken out.
Yes.
Then basically being reapplied under 88, under residential family.
Yes, that you are absolutely correct. Because what's happened is the state has taken those, they've redefined all these terms. Those used to be, what you had in your code before was the language that appeared in the Ohio Revised Code. They amended the Ohio Revised Code, and so now your language, the terminology you have here, doesn't fit anymore with the Ohio. So what we're trying to do is fix that.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. We're taking language out that used to be in the code, in the Ohio Revised Code, and showed up in your code, because you were in sync at one time. You were perfectly
Yes.
fine. But when they did the amendments, now they got you out of sync, and so we need to get back in. And those amendments just became effective in 2020. So, I mean, you're talking about brand-new stuff.
right.
So you're right on the front of this. I mean, you're right up there with everybody else in terms of cleaning, and everybody's having to do this.
And George, just, and not to get, but I know it's a point for residents, and I just want to make it clear, because as you know, we do have some group homes in the village, and there was a lot of discussion on it. And the big thing is, well, can't you limit how many? Can't we put something in place that doesn't allow them at all? And those were two large questions, and very legitimate questions.
Yes.
You know, you're in a residential area and you look
Sure.
at it as a business maybe, or, you know, will it change how things are? And I just kind of want you to give us the answer to that again, because that hasn't changed. I don't think your answer that you're going to give us.
No, you're absolutely right. You cannot prohibit them. You would be in violation of both state and federal law. So you cannot prohibit them, and you cannot limit the number. So you just can't control it in that way at all, okay? You're preempted from that by the state statute and the federal statute. Now, I can tell you that, yes, you've got a couple here in town. Every community I work for has several. I can't think of a community that doesn't have at least one. And most folks don't even know they're there most of them are run fairly reasonably, okay? And if they're done properly, they don't need to be a problem. But under the statute, you really don't have any choice about allowing it to come in or how many may come in.
And that's been that way for,
For a long time, and if it's done anything, it's gotten more stringent from the federal and state level.
Mayor, I could attest that Bedford tried to put some conditions on the group homes, and we ended up in a lawsuit, not just Bedford, but many communities, and I think that's the result. That's the result of these new laws. They wanted to clarify that you can't do this any longer, and
they didn't prevail, did they?
we settled the case, but as most lawsuits
I
are.
have to tell you, I mean, I can't tell you how many lawsuits I've been involved in on zoning matters. I appear as an expert witness on zoning all the time here in Northeast Ohio. I know of nobody who has won a case on this, not one community.
And from my experience, the briefs that were written in the cases, he's correct.
I can't say with the new laws just last year, what I was surprised with the two most recent homes that came here last year is Department of Health contacted me. And I always like it when another agency reaches out to me, you know.
Yep.
What do you know about the improvements? What do you know about this? Are they in compliance? So they were looking, and I also made a good contact there.
Yes.
And they were looking that they were compliant from our side before they issued their approval, that was nice, because
Yeah, the level of cooperation is much higher than it used to be, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
I found that in all the communities I'm working in, that the cooperation with the health department and the local building departments is much better than it was.
Okay, well, with that said, do we, and this is however the board wants to do it, should we go through 125202 and move it to council, make a motion to move it council with these things removed, or would you rather wait for George to put it in the format? I mean,
I can make the changes or bring it back to you, whatever you want to do.
but then we'd have to have another meeting too. I mean, I'm okay, because we'll
Either
probably...
way, whatever you want to do, we'll do.
I'll throw this out. We do have an item here on our agenda tonight, which is the code proposal for the solar panels. And we know that is just this discussion tonight. We do have some, George put together, has a couple templates with us we have in front of us. So we were going to discuss that. And we'd like to get that put in format and move that to council. So if we wanted to wait for another meeting and do that at the same time we do the solar panels, that would be fine too. I would just, however everybody feels.
So my question, Mayor, is so basically we would, or George would be striking item 7 completely out of here. And I don't know why these other 43, 54, 65, why those are highlighted. I don't know what that means. But if we're getting rid of this bed and breakfast language and then everything else that's in here as is related to the residential facilities, you know, I would be fine with that revised, personally, I would be fine with that revised document going straight to council and not necessarily having to come back. If that's all we're doing is taking that item 7 out.
Right.
And renumbering.
That's what we're going to do.
John, what would we have to, with that said, if this body made a motion tonight to say 125202, if we're going to move this forward with item 7, you know, not in here, and the rewritten document.
I would say you approve the amendments with the exception of the deletion of the bed and breakfast references.
And I can get you clean copy for council. If you're prepared to go forward that way, I can have clean copy for council. I think we were all in agreement on where we're headed with this.
What's that?
Why exactly do we want to remove that?
That's what, did you make a decision on that? I suppose?
Because we don't want to allow it.
Well, if it's in the code that it's not allowed, all this really is doing is defining what it is. This isn't a code, it's just a definition of what a bed and breakfast is. And if our code says it doesn't allow them, and they say, well,
Well, this was adding it as a permitted use, and we don't want to do that at this point, I don't think. So, and we were establishing the
well,
standards in the
you're not
conditional
changing
use.
the code, you're just defining what it is. You're not saying it's okay because this isn't it isn't a code, it's just a definition. I mean, it doesn't matter one way or the other to me, but
I'd
would
rather
like to
have
see
it not.
out.
Yeah, I'd rather see, good point, Joe. I follow what you're saying, but at the same time, it gets us back to having that in there where now you get into that gray area where if it's not there, it's not there.
I would say excellent point, Joe, because I didn't catch that, you're absolutely right. From an enforcement standpoint, I don't want to have somebody come here and say, yeah, I know it's definitions, but you say bed and breakfast, so why can't I have one? So from the enforcement side, if we could strike that, I'd rather just strike it.
Let me do that. If you're willing, if you want to move it forward to council with eliminating the bed and breakfast and just doing the residential facilities that you have to do to comply with state statute, I will get you clean copy for council based on the commission's action.
Okay, that would be great, and that would take care of just the definition part. But then when we have conditional use regulations, there's a whole page full of regulations that apply to the bed and breakfast.
Yeah, I would take out all
So
that.
that would be taken out.
I would do all
also.
that. In other words, everything that was part of these proposed amendments, I would clean up, so the only thing that would be going forward to council would be the residential facilities language.
Perfect, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's the easier way to do this, rather than having to come back and look at it again. I think we're all in agreement with where you want to head with this, and I just make that happen.
So all of these other pieces that are taken out would be just kind of put to the side as for a future working document if we wanted to consider bed and breakfast. We
Yeah,
already
at some
have
point in the future, we could always create it if we needed
Right.
to, or you wanted to.
Right.
But we should still probably go through the other ones. It's only 1294.04 that readdresses it, isn't it? Well, why don't we just, should we probably
Do
make
one
it?
at a time, maybe.
Should we do one at a time?
Yeah.
And then move them forward to council one at a time, probably be the cleanest. And then the ones we don't want to move to council, we just don't move to council. They're just proposed tonight.
Okay.
Nothing that says we have to do anything with them, just discussion.
All right.
And we can leave our existing code the way it is.
Okay.
Mr. Bartello, doing it that way, that is legal for us to do it that way, as long as we make in the motion that what is being struck.
Yes, sir.
You want me to run through them real quick?
Yeah, let's run
Might
through
be
them real quick,
easier.
and then we'll do them all at once then.
Yeah, so in
Everybody
12
good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
So in 125202, we'd be taking out item 7, bed and breakfast, but all of the residential facility language would stay. In 126602, we're going to be deleting those residential items that you had indicated have to come out and adding the new language, but we will take out bed and breakfast again. In 126610, we're going to continue to prohibit the renting of rooms, but this exception for bed and breakfast will come out, okay?
I'm sorry, could you go a little slower?
Yeah,
sorry.
Let's go through them.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. Let's start. We're good with 1252. So let's move to 126602.
Before you go off at 1252, I still just want to know why is there 43 in red, 54 to 65, and 76?
That's just renumbering, I think.
That's just renumbering. Okay, that's all I need to know. Okay.
I thought the same thing, but it's just a renumbering, there's no slash.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, George, you want to go with 126602?
Yes. So in 126602, we're still going to delete the adult care language. We're going to add in the residential facility as defined in section 152.08. But down there where we added in item F, bed and breakfast, that'll come out.
Okay?
Okay?
Is everybody good with 126602? We're still in 1266, but we're going to move to 126610.
Yes. So in 126610, which is all the way at the end, we have this, we had a prohibition against renting of rooms, but we made an exception for bed and breakfast. So what we'll do is we'll, assuming that this is where you want to go, we'll continue to have the prohibition against the renting of rooms, but we'll take out the exception for bed and breakfast, right?
Yeah, and that's what we have in there now.
Correct.
And we want to keep it the same.
Correct.
Does everybody on council feel that same way?
Yes. I think what I would like to see is that bed and breakfast is just deleted from any part of these
That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
That's exactly what we're going to do.
Wherever it shows up.
Yes. So, for instance, in 1294 now,
Okay.
The
Is
conditional
everybody,
use-
hold on one second, George. Is everybody good with 126610?
So, not quite. Just one more
Okay.
second. So, ordinance 2009-17, that's what the language is for that is currently, that's this item
Yes.
C? Renting of rooms,
No, that's,
that's before, that's above, that's related to above. This item C is all new, this is not in any current.
Correct.
This isn't in no current legislation, no ordinance anywhere.
you don't have in your regulation right now a specific prohibition against the renting of rooms. But it was my understanding in the conversation we had before, the whole COVID thing, it's been a while,
right.
but that's what, but that you wanted to do that. And so that's language that I added. Because if we don't have a prohibition about it, you're going to have difficulty enforcing it.
Now, let's clarify something here. Renting your house out is different than renting rooms, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, so,
No one can stop you from renting your house.
okay. Ray, because I seen,
But you can't turn your house into a boarding house, okay? You can't have 3 boarders back in each of your 3 bedrooms, okay?
What prohibits me from doing that?
Pardon?
What prohibits me from doing that ordinance-wise?
The language that we proposed here.
The proposed language, there's nothing right now.
Right now, the code doesn't address it. Now, this still wouldn't prohibit someone from renting their house. You know, if someone takes a long-term rental, they rent your house, they live in it for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. It doesn't prohibit someone from doing Airbnb. What we're talking about is dividing your house into separate rooms and renting those rooms and essentially turning your house into a multifamily facility. That changes the character of the neighborhood.
because we don't specifically talk about renting rooms, but we don't allow multifamily. in
Correct.
buildings. We have that addressed.
And so you get into this kind of gray area again, and what we're trying to do is get away from the gray and make it a little more black and white. And so we're just trying to clean that up. But there's nothing that you can do in terms of, if the mayor wants to rent me his house and I go live there for 2 years, there's nothing that prohibits him from doing that.
But if your son wanted to come from California and rent a room to go to school here, he couldn't do that.
Correct. And see, the problem you get is it always starts out as, you know, the in-law suite or whatever, you know, it's a family member. But then once they get it set up and that family member moves on, then it's, gee, I got this really nice facility. I could make a few bucks, right? And pretty soon they're just renting rooms. And then how's that any different than an apartment complex? And depending on how many rooms I'm renting, it may be, and then how many vehicles there are and all that, then that creates issues for the neighbors. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what you got to keep in mind. Someone simply renting your house, you know, I'm going to come and rent Janice's house, that's fine. I moved my family into that house and we live there for the next 2 years and pay her rent. That's fine. But if she divides it up and rents to 4 different people, that's a whole different subject. Now you've changed the character. You've gone away from a single-family home and you've turned it into rental property. But not, you know, rental property from the standpoint of renting a house. You're talking about multifamily because you've got multiple different individuals living there, renting rooms. So what we're trying to do is preserve your single-family character and prohibit that. Okay?
How does the body feel? I'm okay with that and just removing the bed and breakfast. Because we're basically already saying that, we're just in a kind of a gray area. We're already saying no multifamily, correct? We have that in our code, correct?
You do.
Well, our zoning area, our residential country home district
Sure.
is permitted for single-family detached dwellings.
Correct.
So that's what is permitted.
Right.
I'm not playing on words, it's just that it doesn't specifically say no multifamily high-rise housing. We have a criteria of what is permitted, and whatever's not listed is expressly not permitted.
So we
exactly
need
correct.
this to make that whole. Otherwise, it's just what you're saying.
Well-
So we're saying on one end, it's single family, but then we have this gray area that doesn't define it enough where this would define it.
Yes. I mean, your code is clear enough that I could not come in and build an apartment complex on one of your residential lots, okay? But the idea of, can I rent a room? I'm saying it's still a single-family home, but I'm renting rooms.
Right.
And if I rent enough rooms, it's really not a single-family home anymore.
Right.
So that's what we need to clean up. You can't, you know, the code, Rob's absolutely correct. You have what's called a permissive code. Unless something is specifically authorized to be permitted in a district, it's not permitted. So we don't allow multifamily units. So someone can't create a multifamily unit. But see, we don't really discuss the issue of, can I rent a room? And if we don't discuss that, then it sort of backdoors.
It's definitely backdoored, and that, adding that language, it just supports when we platted this property here that we call Walton Hills, it supports it emulates what we wanted to be here, single-family homes. So it tightens it up, it supports it.
Right.
Okay?
How does everybody feel about that? Just removing the bed and breakfast and leaving item C in there, the renting of rooms. I'm good with that. How does
I'm very good with that because it does preserve what we really are as a country home district. And it kind of bolsters that. So I'm fine with that in removing the bed and breakfast language.
Okay?
I'm going to go through every, Joe?
Yes.
Ray?
Yeah, I'm good.
Ray's good. And John, from a legal standpoint, you know, and Rob, from a code enforcement, it's also better for you too, correct?
It'll help.
Okay. All right, so that takes care of 126610, correct?
Now we got
Everybody's-
129404.
Okay, 129404, that's the other packet.
Are we voting on anything on this 1266?
Yeah, we're going to go through them, Joe, and then we're going to do them individually and see, get the wording right, and then if everybody's comfortable, we'll move them to council, and go from there before we move on to item C. So, go ahead, George.
Okay, so in 129404, this is the conditional uses, we had added bed and breakfast as a conditional use. We would take that out. Okay? And then,
Hey, is there anything in there about the residential facilities? Maybe we just deny the 1294 request, because that's just pertaining to bed.
no, this is just, these are conditional uses, and we can't do a conditional use for residential facilities, so
I
they don't
understand.
appear
So
here.
the only issue in 1294 was the
Bed and breakfast. So that, we would just take that one out.
We would just deny that.
Well, let me ask you this, we were adding it, correct?
We were adding it, so we just would not make that amendment.
So we just don't do anything with it?
Correct.
Our existing chapter 1294 would stay the same?
Well, it's still up to council. You still would probably make a motion that the amendment be denied.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
At this meeting, you mean, yes. Okay.
And so that would take, and that would also take care of, in 129407, at the very end, we added all those stipulations and conditions for bed and
Yes.
breakfast. We simply would not do those either. So we would deny that one too.
So we'll deny that one too, okay.
So that should do it.
Okay. So with that said, let's put a motion, John, you might have to help me here a little bit. I want to make sure, whether it's myself or one of the other members of the committee, that we
Sure, Mayor.
make the correct motion for each one of these.
I would say that, is there a motion to amend chapter 1266 Country Home District?
Well, let's start right at the top. Let's start with 1252.
What was that first one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, right at, follow the agenda right there on top.
There it is. We get a motion to amend chapter 1252 as requested, with the exception that any reference to bed and breakfast will be removed.
Second.
Well, I don't think John can make the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make the motion. So then somebody can, did somebody want to make that one, or you want me to make that? I'm okay with making it too. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to accept 1252.02, ask the planning commission for approval on that and move it to adoption of council, with the exception that we strike items related to bed and breakfast.
Second.
Second by Raymond Whedon. Vote on the motion, Mr. D'Amico,
Yes.
Janice St. John,
Yes.
Raymond Whedon,
Yes.
and myself, Don Colograph, yes. 4 yeses. Any comments, Kevin, on that? Okay. We'll move now to 126602. Did you want to look at that one, John? And
Sure, Mayor. Can we get a motion to recommend approval of the amendments stated in chapter 12, as presented in chapter 1266, with the exception of the removal of any reference to bed and breakfast?
This is the one, the only thing we did to this was add the bed and breakfast, correct?
There's the last section was, and we also need to modify clarify the renting of rooms will not be permitted.
Correct.
Residential facility is that referred to in 1266? Let's see.
Yes.
Yes, so any reference to the bed and breakfast would be removed, and the amendment to 126610 will state that the renting of rooms will be prohibited, and any reference to bed and breakfast will be removed.
let me ask you this, should we add to that when we make that? Because this is where we are actually adding the residential facilities, correct?
Yes.
Should we say,
Well, he said we're approving the amendment except for the bed and breakfast.
okay, should we say to federal and to mere federal and state standards, or do we not need that? I don't, am I being too,
I mean, they were written to be that, but.
Okay.
So I don't think you need to
you
say
know,
it.
okay.
It's fine either way, you know, if you want to put
I
that in.
don't know. I just want to confuse who's ever making that motion, that's why I took
I hear
an
you.
easy one, okay? There's always something to everybody's madness, right?
There you go.
Okay. Do we want to go through that again, and then one of us can make that motion? Is anybody pretty clear? Janice, you want to make that
I can
motion?
make that motion.
Okay. Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Mayor, I would like to move to approve the amendments to Chapter 1266 Country Home District, with the exception that any reference to bed and breakfast is deleted from this amendment, and also keeping the amendment that renting homes or renting rooms in a home is not permitted.
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Joe D'Amico. Vote on the motion. Joe D'Amico?
Yes?
Janice St. John?
Yes.
Raymond Whedon?
Yes.
Don Colograph? Yes. Okay, 1266.02, that is moved to council to all 1266, that's both of them,
All
correct?
1266,
Yep,
right.
all 1266.02 and 1266.10. It was chapter 1266 that Janice read into record. Okay. And then I guess we just, with these, John, we just would need a motion to deny those?
I would say-
1294, yes.
Yes, can we,
Deny the amendment to 1294.
Okay. You want me, I can make that motion, or unless someone else wants to make that motion, it's,
Mayor Colograph,
yes.
I move to, I'd like to make a motion to deny modification of this ordinance,
Chapter 1294.
chapter 1294.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Make it easy. Seconded by myself. Let's vote on the motion. Mr. D'Amico, Joseph D'Amico.
Yes.
Janice St. John?
Yes.
Raymond Whedon?
Yes.
Myself, Don Colograph, yes. So 4 yeses to deny 1294.04 and 1294.07, which is under chapter 1294. Okay, very good. So just kind of a recap, we're going to take 1290, we're going to take the 1292.11, 1292.12. This body approved those amendments. We'll move them to council for adoption. And then in item B, we took 1252.02, 1266.02, and 1266.10, which are in chapter 1252 and 1266, and this body approved those with those exceptions that were in the motion. We're going to take them to council for adoption. Item C, everybody's good with that? Any questions on everybody's good? I think that went well. Kevin, anybody out there? Any questions? Okay. Rob, any questions before we move on to item C?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Good. Joe, Janice, Ray, John was good. Okay. Item C, as we were going through this, myself, Rob, our Chief Building Inspector, Rick LaConte, from Safe Built, along with Joe Gelati and George, have had some discussions relating to solar panels and how, of course, they're becoming more popular, they're becoming a little more affordable. There's financing for them, you're seeing them being advertised on TV. So with me and Mr. Smerigan, along with the other people I mentioned, we said we need to put something in place. So talked to George, and he said, well, we can talk about it at this meeting. And he do have in front of you, George gave us a couple examples. George, I thought if you want to lead to the conversation here on this.
Sure. Most communities now are developing some sort of solar energy facilities. You know, when the state of Ohio made these a priority from an energy standpoint, it started to push a lot of businesses to do this, and so a lot of communities started to develop some sort of regulations in order to make sure that they went in properly. And I've written regulations for several communities. And so what I did is I took sort of the template that I used and put it together here as an initial draft for you to consider for Walton Hills. And there's a couple of things to think about. I put in here the definitions, as we always do, the fact that you have to have a permit in order to install it. That's important. Obviously, we're dealing with electricity, and you got to make sure that this stuff is done properly. One of the things that I have in here is that the solar panels have to be an accessory use. In other words, if we're going to allow someone to power a portion of their home with solar panels, that's fine. But I don't think as a community what you're looking at is someone to put up solar panels simply to be generating electricity and selling it into the grid. So you don't want this operated as a business, you want this for somebody's house, so that's why we're making the accessory to a dwelling, okay? Or to a business. I have standards in here for roof-mounted solar arrays on both residential and non-residential properties. And there's some fairly common standards. We can go through and talk about those. The other thing I put in here, and I don't know whether or not you're interested in doing it, but some communities have, and so it's easier for me to give you stuff and have you say no than I don't put it in here at all, and then you got to think about it, okay? It's easier to have it in front of you and make a decision. So the other one I have in here is freestanding or ground-mounted solar arrays. And so what happens is sometimes what folks do is they have a ground-mounted array in their yard as opposed to putting the panels on the roof of the house. They may do that because maybe the roof of the house doesn't have clear lines for sun, whatever reason, they still want to have solar panels. So if you want to allow them, I have given you what are fairly common provisions here in Northeast Ohio for ground-mounted solar panels as well. The other issue that's come up in communities, and just again so you can think about it and discuss it a little, is whether or not for any roof-mounted solar panels, whether you want to limit it to the dwelling or if you want to permit it to be on accessory buildings as well. I've had a situation where folks have put panels on accessory buildings, whether it's barns or whatever. One that's very popular these days in some communities is on the pool houses, and they use it to heat the water for the pool. So
Yeah, there's a couple in the village that are like that.
Yeah.
They got a small solar panel on their pool house.
And again, I don't know if there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I just want whatever we do to be the way you want it to be. And so I just bring those things up so that you're at least thinking about them. It's become very common with pools to heat the water with solar today because it costs so much to run the heat pumps for the pools. This is a really less expensive way to do it.
Well, I guess right off the bat, I would have a question about the 36 inches above the plane of the roof for a roof-mounted solar array in residential districts. If this is your roof line, the panel can be 36 inches above your roof line? Is that what that's saying?
Or are they saying
The plane of the
over
roof.
ridge?
The plane of the roof or the ridge line. And part of why that's in there, and we can play with, and we can talk about the number, it could be a different number. But typically, the roof won't necessarily be at the right angle to capture the rays. And so the panel ends up getting propped up from the roof. And depending on the nature of the roof, it could be propped up fairly far from the roof. If you have a steep pitch roof, you know, it's one thing, but if you got a very flat roof, it's another. And so typically, there's always some sort of limit as to how far above the plane of the roof the panels can extend.
I got you.
And 36 may not be the right number for you, but there needs to be some number,
Well,
otherwise.
I was misunderstanding what that meant, is what it was. I was thinking if this is the roof line, or the ridge of the roof, this panel could be 3 feet
No.
above it.
That's where I was at, Joe, too. And what he's actually, right now, you got it, it's the angle off the roof,
Yeah,
basically.
it's off the plane of the roof.
Right.
So I've got a roof that looks like this, but in order to catch that sunlight, that panel may not be able to lay flat. I have to be up so that I get the maximum sun exposure.
Okay.
The other issue that some communities struggle with is, what they look like, although for the most part now, these things are basically black and you can't even tell, and you've got big setbacks, so from the street, it's really not going to be much of an issue. I don't see an issue. Some communities struggle with having them on the front roofs of houses as opposed to being on the back or a side. But in my experience, it really has not been a big deal.
Your husband is attempting to reach you on your cellular device.
I'm sorry,
Your husband is attempting to reach you on your...
Where's
You're
his
fine.
dinner, Janice?
sorry.
You can go in the office if you need to be called.
No.
Everybody say I don't.
Yeah, I know.
I'm very sorry.
Oh, that's fine, gosh.
And again, the mayor suggested to me, he said that, you've been getting some interest in it, and, if you're gonna go forward with it, you at least ought to have some criteria and some standards so that, there's some basis for allowing it or not allowing it. And I just wanted to give you something as a starting point for discussion. And I didn't mean this to necessarily be the final word.
Right.
But just something where you could start understanding the kinds of things we've put in other codes, and you can figure out how it fits for you.
I did share, I know I shared with you, George, and Rob, and you, with Mr. LaConte, that some communities were struggling with not the roof panels, was more the freestanding solar arrays and where they end up in the yard. Okay? And one community he was referencing had it in their ordinance, not allowed in the front of the yard, in front of the house. And then, and like we have here in our community, we have some houses that the front of the house is not necessarily the street side of the house. And so they had a couple situations where people put up solar panels and they were on the street side of the house, which was the side of the house or the back of the house and not the front of the house. And so they went back and changed their ordinance to say the separate rays can't face any of the street side, instead of using the term front of the house. And we know we have some of those houses in that situation here. So I think that is one thing to think about. Now, George, with that said, are some communities just limiting it to, let's say, roof-mounted only and not the freestanding? Is that
Some
unless a
have done
variance
that.
is requested?
Some have
or-
done that. Some have done that. Most allow either one, but with requirements of how far away from your neighbor's property line you have to be, what's the maximum height of a freestanding one, that sort of thing. So you'll see some of that kind of language in here. And again, it's a question of what you feel is right for your community.
Right. Because, I think we all feel this way. It's, and like me and you talked about it, for the environment, it's the right thing to do. We certainly don't want to discourage anybody from not going in that direction, but at the same time, we want to be able to make sure, like everything we talk about, it's not impeding on the neighbor, or it's
Exactly.
creating an eyesore,
Exactly.
or taken away from your area. So I guess.
Yeah,
that's
it's
where
coming, and, you know, our job is always to protect the neighbors. And so that's really the way I look at this. These things have come a long way. I mean, in the early days, they weren't very efficient. They've gotten much, much better. You still can't run a whole house on this. I mean, you know, it's just not gonna happen. You know, you start trying to do air conditioning, refrigerators and all that stuff, and it's just not gonna go. But, you know, I know people who have had, you know, the ability to like put all the lighting in the house on a solar panel. And, you know, it substantially changes their electric bill. Whether or not they ever pay for those panels is a whole nother
That's the
issue.
issue, yeah.
I mean, they used to say, well, you get a 7-year payback, but I gotta tell you, I've been dealing with this for a long time, and I have yet to see somebody get a 7-year payback. That this doesn't happen. Not unless you're getting some grants or something. And for a while, they had some grants, because the state was trying to encourage it, and the state was giving some funding for this. That's sort of dried up now, but I think there are still people out there that see this as a way of not just cutting their electric bill, but being more, you know, conscious about their footprint, you know?
Right. And we're definitely gonna see more and more of it. Well, I think with that said, I think what we need to do is review it. What I'll probably do is give a copy to council too and stuff, because eventually, if we approve it, it would go to them too, so they get some of their questions. I know we did that with some of this, and then John made a ruling that it should come to planning first, but I think having council look at it too wasn't a bad thing, because some of the questions got resolved, and then we were able to change it with those things we passed, and then instead of going to council and then coming back here. So I'll share this with them too, and have Rob and look at it more, and all of us, John, all of us look at it more, and then we can have another meeting relating to it, but.
Absolutely, and don't be shy about being critical. I have a thick skin, you know, I mean, the idea here is not what I think is right, it's what is best for your community. And so I wanna put this in the format that works best for you. What I'm giving you is just the kind of the basis of it, so that you've got something to build on, as opposed to trying to create something from scratch.
Yeah, I have one question, and this is in the used to be accessory area on page 1. I wholeheartedly understand and completely agree that we shouldn't be trying to generate power and sell to the grid. But I just want to throw it out there, especially with in our country home district, with some of our lots being 1, 2, 3 acres and adjoining. It could be family or just other neighbors. And you know, what do we do? I mean, I know it does say, you know, no cooperative facilities, but should we have, give some consideration to, we have 3, 4, 5 acres of land. We've got adjoining properties, and a couple of neighbors want to go in on a system. You know, not to sell to the grid, but because we have so much space between our lots to put panels out there. Just something that, you know, do we want to, is it, that's, under this cooperative facility, it said you can't do that. That's what we're saying.
No, and again, and that's like I say, we need to adjust this to whatever you think is right for you. In a lot of, well, okay, I wrote one of these for Beechwood.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the average lot size in Beechwood is a peanut compared to your lots,
Right.
okay? And so, you know, it doesn't make sense there. But you're right, you have a different circumstance. And so, you know, maybe we need to adjust that for you.
Just something to think about. I mean, again, I wholeheartedly agree, not trying to turn it into a generator facility, not that.
But from an enforcement standpoint,
Rob's trying to make his job easier.
well, oh my God, you have no idea, Joe. Anytime we get 2 neighbors, That's just like, the same reason why we don't particularly care for shared driveways.
They never fight, do they?
Well, I guess it works out, or no, I got one in Alexandria that didn't work out, and it wasn't. I was gonna say, I guess it works out if it's a family.
Yeah.
But we've had families not work out either, as the years go by. So, I understand what you're saying, and from a green, you know, I think of some very large lots that we have here, more than 5 acres. Sounds like a terrific idea. This guy sells, it's a civil issue, and no matter how many times I inform neighbors that it's a civil issue, the fence, the whatever, the doghouse,
You still get the call.
that's why, again, I'd say no. Because then they come to me and they want me to fix all their issues, and it just does not, it never ends well. Whenever you're sharing anything across the property line. Just my 2 cents.
But then they would still have the option of coming for a variance.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So that would be their,
And zoning.
So you just have to be careful about that stuff because, as Rob points out, the personalities change,
Right.
okay? I mean, even if it's a family thing, you know, if Uncle Harry drops dead and somebody else ends up in that house, now it's not family anymore, okay? And so things change. And then that starts to become issues, and unfortunately, he's the guy they call, you know, and you're dealing with power, so it's kind of a touchy thing. You know, it's not like, I mean, it's one thing if we're dealing with a driveway and he didn't pay for his share of the plowing kind of thing. No one's gonna die from that. But if we have an electrical issue, someone could. So you gotta be careful.
let me ask you this, George, that anything that you're seeing that we should focus a little more on, I guess, you pointed out as far as, I guess the two things are, do we want to allow both the roof mounted and the, how do you want to say it, array or freestanding?
Freestanding, yeah.
I guess that's a big issue. I guess it's common to have the roof, so it's not, I don't think it's a matter of eliminating that one, it'd be just whether or not we want to allow
Exactly.
freestanding.
And the roof ones are easy because, you know, they don't really change the nature of the neighborhood. They don't really change the visual appearance of the house for the most part. So there really isn't much of an impact. If I put an array with, you know, 10 panels out in my yard, that's a little different, you know.
Yeah.
And building behind Walton Art, they got that big, huge one.
Well, and some of these things are fairly sophisticated. I mean, they have those arrays now that are motorized so that they move with the sun, okay?
Yeah.
And that makes them more efficient, but, you know, if you're a neighbor, you've got this thing next to you that, you know, and
Well, but like, even, I know this is just a template, but you threw in there 20-foot setback. I mean, if you abide by the setbacks for a ground mounted, then it's almost, it's a right, you know, it's like, we don't want to be in everybody's backyard. But, I mean, like a shed or anything else, if you abide by the setbacks with your ground mounted 6x12 panel, you're 20 feet off the property line, you can't be more than 15 feet high again, I know it's just a template, but bottom line, it's in the backyard.
yeah, and it's really no different than, like you say, like a shed or some kids' play equipment or anything else. If you do it right, and you have the right setbacks, and you have the right height limitations,
Right.
it's really not a whole heck of a lot different than other things that people have in their yards all the time.
Right. And it's a positive thing. I mean, it's something we certainly don't want to discourage.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I'm really open to that. This may be a stupid question, but when you have a freestanding in your yard, does that cause reflections on the sun that would bother the neighbors, go through their windows or whatever?
It can, that has been an issue. It's not as bad as it would seem because of, you know, the panels are designed to absorb the light, so you don't get a great deal of reflection, but when they get at a certain angle, you can.
Okay.
Good question.
And I could see that happening.
If it's gonna happen anywhere,
You're gonna get sunlight bouncing off a swimming pool, off the water from a swimming pool when the sun is at the exact right angle. It
Exactly.
might shine through somebody's back window.
Exactly. Well, I think it's at least worth considering, because I think you're probably going to find more and more folks interested in doing something. And at least if you have some standards, there's a way for them to do it.
And we would permit it the same as other things, Rob, just adding another electrical device or panel?
no, I'm gonna research that a little
Okay.
bit, because I took some notes. The chapter would be 1275, and then where compliance and permit required, I'd cross-reference our permit fees, and then I would do the research of other communities on what permit fees should be. So, and just so I have some feedback, so.
Be consistent
Yeah.
with everybody.
That's what I would do, and at least you're in the ballpark then.
Correct.
So you mentioned World of Art, is that in Bedford, or is that Walton Hills, and where they have their panels?
That one is in Bedford.
Yeah, it's in Bedford.
Okay.
Right at the lines.
It's the building behind World of Art.
Right, okay. I've seen it, I've seen the panels.
Right across the about,
I know where they are, I've seen it, I just wasn't sure which part of the.
Warren Roofing has a decent amount of panels
Right.
on their roof as well, over on Crick Road.
Right.
Well, and some of the technology's getting pretty fancy. I mean, Tremco,
Okay.
who's a roofing company,
Right.
they've come up with this stuff that, how you put down like a rubberized roof that actually collects the solar energy as part of the actual roof fabric. And it's pretty slick. Now, it's not as efficient as some of the panels, but it does work.
Very cool.
And they've been promoting that. So the technology in that field is going to grow, because that's one of those, anything energy related, it's like electric cars and electric trucks and all that. Those things are going to happen.
That's what,
Yeah.
make it smaller.
And the big thing has always been the batteries and how you store the energy and use it. And as the battery technology gets better, the use of the solar panels gets better. So, because in the past, the problem was if you weren't using the energy right away, it was difficult to store it. And what was happening is most people were just connected to the grid and were selling it back to the power company. Okay, and so you had like what they call a double meter, or reverse meter. The meter would go both ways. So sometimes your bill's going up, sometimes your bill's going down. But that's really not efficient for a homeowner. It'd be easier if you could save up some of that energy on a nice sunny day and use it for the next cloudy day, But those batteries are not that great. Although in the last 5 years, they've come a long, long way.
And with the implementation of the LED, in the past, you wouldn't think about running a whole house. You definitely can run lighting. You got a house that's retrofitted to LED, you could definitely easily run lighting.
Yes.
Which is nice. So yeah, batteries are gonna come along. They look, even the small stuff that we use, look where it's come just in the last 10 years.
Well, or look even at the electric cars. You got when they first came out, 120 miles range was like it. Now you're getting 300. And the car didn't get bigger, so the battery got more efficient.
Yeah.
So as they do that, then it creates more options. But yeah, I know folks who've been able to essentially run all the lighting in their house off some solar panels on their roof. Yeah, it doesn't run the air conditioning and, that kind of crap, but it does do all the lights.
Just to kind of, and we can wrap this up unless we have any more questions. When we started to research it, we do have quite a bit that kind of goes with this, Mayor's, it is the windmills. Because at one time, and Janice, you're probably, Joe, I don't know if you were on the planning commission at that time, but so we do have a pretty good section about wind power, because there was, a lot of communities including ourselves, you're concerned because you do get noise out of some of the larger windmills and things like that. So I don't know if we need to maybe take a look at that too at the same time, just because they're kind of related, George. Just to make sure that's still, because it's been a few years, maybe just make sure that's
Be more than happy to do
correct, because that's going to become more and more popular too. It was real popular, kind of faded a little bit, but that technology's changing too again.
Well, what's really done it with that are the turbines now, you know, where you've got a fairly small, instead of having the, you know, the big pinwheel
prop
kind of thing, they're just small, and it's a little turbine, and the wind blows through it, and there have been a number of office buildings that have mounted those on the parapet at the office, and because they're up there, they get that steady wind, and they've been able to power a large portion of the office energy use through those turbines. And that's becoming very efficient. So I think that as that continues, you'll see some more interest in that. But that technology's come a long way too.
So maybe we just take a look at that too.
Sure.
If we're there. Okay, how does any more, you want to continue in any discussion, or kind of take it back for review and then we'll have another meeting and kind of, you know, what's that?
Take it back for review.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm glad we got it out there. It's something I think we need to discuss, get something in place, because it's going to be coming. So.
Okay.
So we're not behind, George, we're probably right in the beginning.
You're right there. You're
Okay,
right there with
good.
everybody else.
Good.
I mean, you're as far as anybody on, like, for instance, those residential facilities, as I say, the state law just changed in 2020. You're right at the front of the group that's getting their stuff. So you're right there. And with this solar stuff, I mean, this is all pretty new too. So you're pretty right there.
Good.
You're on top of things. I give you credit for that.
Okay, well, we've already gone through, we'll take those proposed amendments to council for adoption, and then item C, 021-03, the planning commission will look at solar energy facilities, decide along with the administration where we'll put it in the chapter, and our next meeting, that will be on the agenda. Okay? Can I have any questions relating to tonight? If not, can I have a motion? Well, before we do, Kevin, any questions from anybody? None. Okay, everybody good?
Yes.
Can I have a motion for adjournment?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Third.
We got it right. Okay. Give it to, who are we giving it to? Give it to Janice. Seconded by Janice St. John. Vote on the motion. Joe D'Amico?
Yes.
Janice St. John?
Yes.
Raymond Whedon?
Yes.
Don Colograph? Yes. Meeting and Planning Committee, meeting of April 1st, 2021, adjourned at 8:44 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, George.
Thank you.